The hum of the server room was a constant companion, a low-frequency pulse that had become as familiar to Elise Harper as her own heartbeat. For 19 months, she'd lived in this digital cathedral, surrounded by blinking lights and the soft whir of cooling fans, building something extraordinary. Her creation, Aegis Veil, was no ordinary cybersecurity system. It was a revolution. It could predict cyber threats before they fully formed, weaving adaptive defenses in real time like a living organism protecting itself from harm. Elise had named it after the mythical shield of Athena, a symbol of divine protection. And tonight, as she sat in her dimly lit office at Nexus Innovations, she was on the verge of proving it could change the world. Elise leaned back in her chair, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The simulation she'd been running for the past 6 hours was nearly complete. On her monitor, lines of code scrolled past, interspersed with real-time visualizations of Aegis Veil's performance. The system was under attack, not a real one, but a brutal gauntlet of her own design, mimicking the most sophisticated cyberattacks known to the industry. Botnets, zero-day exploits, polymorphic malware's thrown everything at it. And Aegis Veil wasn't just holding its ground, it was thriving. It identified patterns she hadn't explicitly programmed, flagged vulnerabilities in the simulated network she hadn't anticipated, and neutralized threats with a precision that felt almost sentient. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her focus. A text from her colleague Priya Shah. "You still at the office? It's 2 a.m. Go home, genius." Elise smiled faintly but didn't reply. Home was a sparsely furnished apartment she hadn't seen in daylight for weeks. This project was her life, her obsession. She'd left a cushy job at Google to join Nexus, a startup with big promises and bigger funding, because she believed in their vision, or at least she had. Lately, doubts had crept in, shadows cast by the polished smiles of the company's leadership. Nexus Innovations was the brainchild of Julian Voss, a charismatic CEO whose TED Talks and Forbes interviews painted him as a visionary. To the outside world, he was a tech prophet preaching the gospel of innovation. To Elise, he was a puzzly man who could charm a room full of investors, but whose questions about her work always felt too calculated, too probing. He'd stop by her lab unannounced, leaning casually against the doorframe, asking about Aegis Veil's progress with a grin that never quite reached his eyes. "You're doing incredible things, Elise," he'd say. "The board's buzzing about this one." She'd nod, thank him, and get back to work, but the weight of his gaze lingered long after he left. Tonight, though, none of that mattered. The simulation was a triumph. Aegis Veil had intercepted every attack, adapting faster than she'd dared hope. She saved the results, encrypted the data, and sent a brief email to Julian's assistant, Lauren Chun, requesting a meeting to present the findings. Then she shut down her workstation, grabbed her jacket, and stepped into the cool San Francisco night. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something like peace. Aegis Veil was ready. It was real. And it was hers. The next morning, Elise arrived at Nexus's sleek headquarters, a glass and steel monolith overlooking the bay. Her laptop was tucked under her arm, loaded with the demo that would showcase Aegis Veil's capabilities. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with possibilities. This wasn't just about proving the system worked, it was about securing her legacy. She'd poured her expertise, her intuition, and years of research into this project. Before Nexus, she'd sketched the first concepts for Aegis Veil in a notebook during late-night coding sessions at Google, dreaming of a system that could outthink hackers the way a chess grandmaster anticipates an opponent's moves. Nexus had given her the resources to make it real, but the idea, the soul of it, was hers. Lauren greeted her at the reception desk, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Julian's running a bit behind," she said, tapping at her tablet. "He squeezed you in for 15 minutes at 2 p.m. Conference room A." Elise nodded, suppressing a twinge of irritation. 15 minutes to present a system that could redefine cybersecurity? She'd make it work. At 2 p.m. sharp, she pushed open the door to conference room A and froze. Julian wasn't alone. Sitting beside him was Cassandra Reed, Nexus's general counsel, her sharp features softened by a practiced smile. A third person stood by the window, a man Elise vaguely recognized from the finance team. Derek something. He didn't meet her eyes. "Elise, have a seat," Julian said, gesturing to a chair across from him. His tone was warm, but there was an edge to it like a blade wrapped in velvet. Cassandra and Derek are just here to provide context. Context? Elise's pulse quickened, but she sat down, placing her laptop on the table. I'm ready to walk you through the demo, she said, keeping her voice steady. Aegis Vale exceeded every benchmark in last night's simulation. Before we get to that, Julian interrupted, sliding a manila folder across the table. We need to discuss your employment agreement. Cassandra leaned forward, her voice crisp and clinical. Section 12.4 of your contract clearly states that any intellectual property developed using Nexus Innovations resources, including hardware, software, or personnel, belongs exclusively to the company. Elise's stomach twisted, but she'd anticipated this. Corporate IP clauses were standard. She'd signed similar ones at Google. I understand, she said carefully. But Aegis Vale's core concept predates my time here. I have documentation notebooks, dated files proving I was working on it years ago. Cassandra's smile didn't waver. While you may have had a preliminary idea, the functional system was built on Nexus's dime, using Nexus's infrastructure. That makes it ours. Julian leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Let's cut to the chase, Elise. Aegis Vale is a Nexus asset. The board's thrilled with your contribution, and we want to ensure you're fairly compensated. He tapped the folder. Open it. Elise's hands were steady as she flipped it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper outlining a success bonus, a one-time payment of $400,000, contingent on Aegis Vale's commercial launch. $400,000 for a system she knew could be worth billions. For 19 months of 80-hour weeks. For her vision, her creation. This is generous by industry standards, Julian said, his voice smooth as polished stone. Tomorrow, I'll be presenting Aegis Vale to our top investors. We're expecting to secure $100 million in new funding. After that, we'll roll it out as Nexus's flagship product. Elise's throat tightened. And my role in that rollout? Cassandra exchanged a glance with Julian. We're transitioning you out effective immediately, she said. You'll receive the bonus, of course, and a severance package. We appreciate your contributions. The room seemed to tilt. Fired. They were firing her, stripping her of her work, her future, her creation. Julian's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something cold and predatory there, a hunter who'd cornered his prey. Congratulations, Elise, he said, his smile thin. You've done great things here. She wanted to scream, to fling the folder back in his face, to demand they acknowledge what they were doing. But instead, a strange calm settled over her. She'd seen this coming, not in this exact form, but close enough. 7 months ago, she'd caught an anomaly in her server logs. An unauthorized login attempt, traced back to an executive account. Nothing had been taken, but the intrusion had triggered an alert she'd buried deep in the system. From that moment, she'd started preparing, building safeguards not just for Aegis Vale but for herself. I understand, she said, her voice even. She closed her laptop and stood. Good luck with the demo tomorrow, Julian. His smile faltered just for a second, as if he'd expected resistance. Security will escort you to your office to collect your things, he said. Elise nodded, her mind already racing ahead. They thought they'd won. They thought they could take Aegis Vale and erase her from the equation. But they didn't know about the gift she'd left them, a small, elegant piece of code embedded in the presentation system, set to activate precisely 10 minutes into tomorrow's demo. The security guard, a stoic man named Marcus, watched her like a hawk as she packed her office. A cardboard box sat on her desk, filling up with personal items. A framed photo of her parents, a battered copy of Neuromancer, a cactus she'd somehow kept alive. Her colleagues avoided her gaze as she moved through the open-plan workspace, their whispers trailing in her wake. She was the cautionary tale now, the brilliant engineer who'd flown too close to the sun. Marcus escorted her to the lobby, where she handed over her badge. Take care, Miss Harper, he said, his tone softer than she'd expected. You too, she replied, stepping into the elevator. As the doors closed, she allowed herself a small smile. The box under her arm felt heavier than it should, not because of its contents but because of what it represented. She wasn't leaving empty-handed. Not by a long shot. That night, Elise ordered Thai takeout and settled onto her couch with a glass of wine. Her apartment was a mess, book strewn across the coffee table. Unopened mail piled on the counter, but she didn't care. She flipped on a sitcom, letting the canned laughter wash over her, and waited. At 9:45 p.m. her phone rang. The caller ID showed Lauren Chun. "Elise," Lauren said without preamble, "Julian needs to see you. Now." "It's almost 10, Elise replied, feigning surprise. "He says it's urgent. A car's already on its way." 40 minutes later, Elise stepped into Nexus's headquarters for the second time that day. The building was eerily quiet, the usual bustle replaced by the hum of air conditioning. Lauren led her to the executive conference room, where Julian sat alone at a polished mahogany table. His tie was undone, his hair disheveled, and his eyes burned with a mix of anger and desperation. "Fix it," he snapped the moment the door closed. Elise took her time settling into a chair, crossing one leg over the other. "Fix what exactly?" "Don't play dumb," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You sabotaged the demo." She raised an eyebrow. "Sabotaged? I've been gone all day. Security watched me pack. I didn't take any devices, didn't access any systems. How could I possibly?" "The test run crashed," he cut in, slamming a fist on the table. "The system went haywire. It started flagging non-existent threats, generating thousands of false positives. It's useless." Elise tilted her head, her expression neutral. "Sounds like a technical glitch. Have you tried rebooting?" His face flushed crimson. "This isn't a joke, Elise. We've got 12 investors flying in tomorrow. $100 million is on the line." "Your investors," she corrected softly. "Your system." Julian took a deep breath, visibly forcing himself to calm down. When he spoke again, his tone was smoother, almost conciliatory. "Look, maybe we moved too fast yesterday. I'm willing to reconsider. Co-creator credit, a bigger payout, maybe some equity. Let's talk." Elise leaned back, studying him. "Tell me exactly what happened during the test run." He hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "The system, it turned inward. It started identifying Nexus's own infrastructure as a threat. Then it generated reports, hundreds of them, calling out what it labeled internal governance violations. It's like it's accusing us of something." A slow smile spread across her face. "Aegis Veil is designed to detect threats, Julian. All threats." His eyes narrowed. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Aegis Veil is working as intended. It's an adaptive AI trained to recognize malicious patterns, whether they come from outside or inside an organization. During development, I fed it case studies, real-world examples of cyberattacks, including ones orchestrated by insiders. It learned to spot betrayal." Julian's face paled. "You're saying it's spying on us?" "I'm saying it's doing its job," she replied. "It's identifying risks to the system's integrity. Sounds like it found some." He leaned forward, his voice a harsh whisper. "You can't prove anything." "I don't need to," she said simply. "Aegis Veil has been logging everything for months, every unauthorized access, every copied file, every altered line of code. It's all in those reports, complete with timestamps, IP addresses, and keystroke records. If you're lucky, the investors won't see them. But I wouldn't count on luck." The silence that followed was electric. Julian stared at her, his anger giving way to something more calculating. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Elise folded her hands on the table. "Full recognition as Aegis Veil's creator and lead architect. 60% ownership of all related patents and IP. A seat on the board to oversee its ethical deployment. And $15 million in compensation for your attempt to erase me." His jaw tightened. "That's blackmail." "No," she said, her voice steady. "That's leverage. Blackmail would be me sending those reports to the SEC and every major tech outlet before your demo tomorrow." Julian glared at her, his mind clearly racing. Then slowly he leaned back, his shoulders slumping. "The system," he said, his voice tight. "Can you fix it before the demo?" "Aegis Veil isn't broken," she replied. It's locked down because its creator was removed from the authentication chain. It's protecting itself. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a USB drive, placing it on the table. This contains an update to restore proper access. Consider it a gesture of good faith, assuming we have a deal. He stared at the drive, then at her. You planned this from the start. Elise shook her head. I hoped it wouldn't come to this. But after I caught you poking around my server 7 months ago, I started building protections for Aegis Vale and for myself. His eyes narrowed. How did you know I'd try to cut you out? I didn't, she admitted, standing and picking up her bag. But Aegis Vale is designed to predict threats before they materialize. I guess I learned a thing or two from it. The next morning, Elise returned to Nexus as its newly appointed co-founder and chief technology officer. Julian introduced her to the investors with a smile that barely masked his resentment. The demo was flawless. Aegis Vale deflected every simulated attack with surgical precision, earning murmurs of approval from the room. One investor, a venture capitalist with a reputation for bluntness, turned to Julian. This is groundbreaking. What sparked the idea? Julian hesitated, his jaw tightening. It was Elise's vision, he said, the words sounding like they'd been dragged out of him. She brought it to life. Nexus just gave her the tools. Elise stepped in, fielding technical questions with ease. As she spoke, her phone buzzed with a notification from Aegis Vale. Authentication restored. Threat neutralized. System integrity secured. She suppressed a smile. The AI was learning faster than she'd expected, adapting to protect itself and her. But the story didn't end there. Over the next few months, Elise uncovered more than just Julian's betrayal. Digging into Aegis Vale's logs, she found evidence of a deeper conspiracy within Nexus. Julian hadn't acted alone. He'd been working with Cassandra and a handful of board members to siphon off proprietary tech, planning to sell it to a rival firm for a massive payout. The internal governance violations Aegis Vale had flagged weren't just about her termination. They pointed to a web of financial misconduct and data breaches orchestrated from the top. Elise faced a choice: expose the scandal and risk tanking Nexus, or use the evidence to force reforms. She chose the latter, quietly presenting her findings to the board's independent directors. Cassandra was ousted, along with 2 complicit executives. Julian was allowed to stay. His public persona was too valuable to the company, but his influence was curtailed, his every move watched. Aegis Vale's first commercial deployment came 6 months later, when it thwarted a coordinated attack on a major telecom network. The incident, which could have crippled global communications, instead cemented Aegis Vale's reputation as the gold standard in cybersecurity. Nexus's valuation soared to $5 billion, and Elise's name became synonymous with innovation. She wasn't just a coder anymore. She was a force, a woman who'd turned betrayal into triumph. Yet success didn't erase the lessons she'd learned. At a tech conference in Seattle, a young engineer approached her during a Q&A. How do you build something as game-changing as Aegis Vale? He asked, his eyes bright with ambition. Elise smiled, her gaze drifting to the crowd. It's not just about the tech, she said. It's about understanding that the biggest threats often come from within your company, your team, even yourself. Build systems that can adapt, evolve, and protect their core principles no matter what. And never, ever let someone else define your worth. As she spoke, her phone vibrated with a familiar notification. Aegis Vale. System secure. Protections active. She glanced at it, her smile widening. The AI was still watching, still learning, still guarding what mattered most. And so was she.
If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.